If you could all pretend I posted this video a few weeks ago when it was a bit more topical, I'd really appreciate it. Okay. There's a new film out called Dune Part 2, and it's very quickly becoming quite a cultural phenomenon. And quite right too, it's an exceptional blockbuster. I really responded to it, and I've gone back and forth on whether or not to talk about it on this channel, because I think we're all kind of in agreement that it's a spectacular film, and there didn't seem like much of a perspective that I was able to add to the conversation. That was until one of the conversations that was being had about this film concerned an old friend of mine, Star Wars. There's basically an idea that in a post-Denis Villeneuve Dune world, we've moved past the need for this derivative, washed-up space franchise from the 1970s. People are renouncing their faith in the Force and choosing to follow the Lisan al-Gaib into his sci-fi domination. What could possibly go wrong there? And I thought this was worth talking about as a Star Wars fan who loves the Dune movies and has issues with where Star Wars is at the moment. I suppose the big, hyperbolic clickbait question is, has Dune killed Star Wars? And the answer is complicated, and I'd like to dive into why. The driving force behind a lot of this conversation is the similarity between the two properties. The idea that Star Wars was always a knockoff of Dune, and now that we've seen Dune done right on the big screen, there's little reason to care about Star Wars. It's a pretty objective fact that there are elements in 1977 Star Wars that can be drawn directly back to Frank Herbert's 1965 novel. The setting, the political state of the galaxy, some of the central themes. Frank Herbert even said at the time that he would try very hard not to sue, and this observation has prompted a lot of viral tweets expressing a newfound Dune-fueled disdain for Star Wars. The realization that Star Wars is just a worse version of Dune is actually depressing me. I'll just be sitting there and then realize, that's why Luke grew up on a desert planet, or that's why the Jedi use blades, or Darth Maul is just Fade Rotha, or the Emperor, huh? So that's pretty definitive. Case closed. George Lucas stole everything from Dune, and for 40 years we lapped it up in the absence of a good cinematic Dune adaptation. But now we have one, we can be done with Star Wars, right? No, of course not. A story is more than just its influences, and its value is not entirely dependent on its originality. Dune had influences too. The Quran, hallucinogens, the concept of sand. I don't think we have to abandon Dune as soon as we realise this and keep tracing things back until we find the first truly original idea. Breaking something down into a series of bullet points is a great way to take two unique experiences and make them look like they're the same. Sometimes I get called pretentious for saying there's a difference between story and plot, but I feel like it's a pretty vital one that's incredibly relevant here. Like, okay, they've both got sand in them and they both have an emperor, but how did they make you feel? If you can point to these two very different emotional journeys and say that they provide an audience with the exact same experience, then fine, but I'd argue that you can't do that. The tonal influences that Star Wars is built from are totally different, and they have way more of a bearing on what you actually gain from watching it. The spirit of adventure from the Flash Gordon serials, the nobility of the samurai movies, and that's without even mentioning the stuff that comes straight from the soul of George Lucas. His fascination with fast cars, his frustration of being stuck in a shitty town where nothing happens, and his uncomfortable attraction to his sister. If it wasn't clear, that last one was a joke, but this is all the stuff that really makes the storytelling pop. So while two very similar things can coexist while both having merit, I'd argue that in most meaningful ways, these things aren't even that similar. So no, Dune has not killed Star Wars. Thank you for watching. The video hasn't ended yet. I wonder why that is. Oh, it might be because Dune actually has killed Star Wars. Here's a viral tweet concerning the two that I actually can kinda get behind. I hope Frank Herbert can see adaptations of his work taking pop culture by storm while Star Wars is lying in some ditch somewhere. My previous argument kind of centered on Star Wars as a concept and the original movie in particular, but it's worth considering where it sits as a modern-day franchise. And in that regard, I'm afraid to say that my beloved space movies have been murdered. They drank the worm poison and have been returned to the desert. It's over. Obviously, I'm being a bit of a silly sausage here, but as we watch Star Wars shrink itself onto streaming, churning out cheap-looking, small-feeling rubbish and abandoning its cinematic roots, it's very nice and refreshing to get a big-screen epic like Dune to really remind us of the true power of cinema. It's satisfying to see Dune triumph, whether you consider that a triumph over Star Wars or just an unrelated one. It's great as a viewer not having to constantly ask, what are we doing here? And just being transported on a journey of unexpected levels of excellence. In that sense, it probably will make it harder for me to return to my favourite franchise and continually settle for less. Andor already showed us what we could be getting on the small screen, but the big screen slate has been drier than Arrakis, and seeing a space movie, or a spice movie, absolutely excel on a similar blockbuster scale, while Star Wars' return to theatrical releases will be a spin-off of a Disney Plus show, just makes me want to pull what's left of my beautiful hair out. I don't think it's fair to say that Dune's success speaks to a failure on Lucasfilm's part, but at the same time it is worth considering whether these films would be doing so spectacularly well if we were still getting regularly released good Star Wars movies. They may have created a bit of a gap in the market by not releasing them, because people can only stomach so much sand. Let me talk about sand for a bit, because I kind of see Tatooine as the epitome of the limited scope of Star Wars at the moment. As far as ideas go, the constant returning to this place that was once meant to represent dead-end nothingness shows a failure to look beyond what we know. But also, when it comes to the execution, having these supposedly sprawling deserts just feel like small circular rooms with visible LED screens as a border, or having these hustling, bustling hubs of scum and villainy just feel like a single road that people can walk down but they're not able to leave in any real hurry. That doesn't feel great in a saga that was once known for its unprecedented scale. But none of my, we're doing sand again sentiment extends to Arrakis. I can't get enough of seeing that big, beautiful desert on the big screen. It looks horrible and harsh and unforgiving, but also stunning and impressive, and I kind of want to go and experience desert power for myself. Maybe I'm falling a little into those surface level comparisons, because it does remain quite difficult to actually compare these two as properties. At the moment, they're doing such different things. We'd be feeling a lot less of the Dune hype if we'd been soured on it by being fed loads and loads of content in that world. It's very easy to ride the excitement train, or excitement worm, from two stellar movies. It'll be maintaining the quality and the audience interest over a prolonged period of time that will prove the real challenge. Because they shouldn't. They should find a nice place to wrap it up and just quit while they're ahead. But I know that they won't. I've no doubt that Warner Brothers will want to rinse Dune for all it's worth, and it'll only be then that it's fair to talk about in the same conversation as Star Wars. If they actually do want Dune to secure a cultural victory over Star Wars, and I'm sure they don't, I'm sure this is nothing but fan projection, but they would do well to look at Star Wars as a cautionary tale. As Dune moves into the world of streaming television, an awareness of the idea that less is more would do it a lot of favours. But it's a pretty common theme that studio execs are incapable of taking the right lesson from both failure and success. I'm sure they're going to look at how we've all responded to this earnest, creative movie that was given the chance to continue its storytelling beyond the first installment, and they're going to go, wow, audiences really do love sand. Now let's cancel a few more things. But if we want to actually take something away from this, yeah, put your faith in storytellers with vision. Give them the means to realise that vision. Look at why films like Oppenheimer, Avatar, Top Gun, and Dune are dominating the box office, while micromanaged, studio-interfered, compromised products are falling out of favour. Look at Barbie's success too. Greta Gerwig seems to have so many stories about ideas she had to fight to keep in the movie. They wanted to get rid of I'm Just Ken, and it's become almost as much of a phenomenon as the film itself. How do you not see that and go, oh, you know what, maybe we should ease off? Dune's success is also not built on an audience recognising a thing or being reminded of something else that they love. Obviously, it's got this iconic sci-fi foundation, but to a general audience, that means nothing. It's new to them, and they don't care. In a time where it seems like nostalgia is king, it's worth considering that it might not be. Michael Keaton's Batman came back last year for the biggest flop of all time, and now teenagers are making memes about Shai Hulud on TikTok. And there's a lot that Star Wars specifically can take from the success of Dune. I know Star Wars fans get a bit touchy when you point at something and say, Star Wars can learn from this. It happened a lot with Andor when people were saying, there's no excuse for all of Star Wars not to be on this level when it comes to production value and commitment to storytelling. You had people going, well actually, I'm glad Star Wars can be lots of things, and I don't want it to all be dark and gritty like Andor. As if those were the elements that people were saying should be universal. It's a defensive insecurity, makes people lash out. I get it, we're all guilty of it, but going, well, I'm glad Star Wars isn't Dune, they can be different, that's not particularly useful here. As much as these series are incomparably distinct, Lucasfilm can surely see that investing in a particular filmmaker telling the story they want to tell on this scale will get bums in seats and sell some friggin' tickets, however weird that may get. You don't have to keep hiring people and shitting the bed as soon as they start to do their thing. You don't have to take a story that seems daunting to tell and split it up into a 6-part TV series that looks like mud. And you don't have to keep bringing back Darth Nader to get people to care. So yeah, maybe it's true that Dune didn't kill Star Wars, but I think it's fair to say that Star Wars did itself some serious harm, and Dune is thriving in a probably unrelated but comedically timed way, especially when it comes to movies. I'd love to see a new big screen Star Wars that achieves even a fraction of what Dune is doing right now, and I don't mean financially, I mean as far as scope and storytelling goes. And as a franchise, I'd like to see Dune learn from the mistakes of Star Wars, because in my ideal version of events, these two can both thrive, and they can both take a distinct place in my heart, and hopefully the hearts of the general audience. Frankly, I'd love to see it. But where do you stand on all of this? Which team do you align yourself with? Has Star Wars come and gone? Has it had its time and the only people who can't accept that are the people with bedrooms full of Lego sets? Let me know. Or is Dune too bleak and miserable to truly capture our hearts and imagination in the same way that the galaxy far, far away has? Or is the answer maybe a bit more complicated and boiling things down into clickbait extremes is not very helpful or realistic? I'm sure it might be that last one, but let me know either way. Can you say either way if it's a 3-way option? Let me know each of the things that you believe in the comments below. I'd love to read them all. I would like to thank YouTube user Chaz Johansson for their comment on last week's non-video. I think it was the push I needed to start looking at Dune through a Star Wars lens and actually made me realize I had something to say about it, so I'm very grateful for that. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed, please like, share and subscribe. If you didn't enjoy, please like, share and subscribe. I'll be back next week. I've got a Doctor Who video next week. I was nearly done with it last time, but this felt more important and more topical, so I promise Doctor Who next week. I'll see you then. Love you lots.